Newsmax Prime continues now as we highlight another disturbing report from Judicial Watch. That organization obtaining documents from the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol confirming there was an attack last summer by a Mexican government helicopter on our Border Patrol agents after that chopper crossed into U.S. airspace. For more on this story, let's bring in Chris Farrell, the Director of Research and Investigations and member of the board for Judicial Watch. He Skypes in from Judicial Watch headquarters in Washington, D.C. So, Chris, as I understand it, the Mexican government initially denied that the attack occurred late last June. Exactly where did this all take place?
It happened right along the border, directly south of Tucson, and the attack itself occurred on two marked Border Patrol vehicles. What was remarkable, of course, was that the Mexicans denied it at first. They said that they were conducting operations near the border, but that no such thing had ever happened. And now, of course, we have documentation that proves that it did. And of course, we already knew that it did because of the reports from the Border Patrol itself, who were quite frank about what had occurred, and that the Mexican army had actually come up near the border and attempted to offer some sort of an apology concerning the matter. So this is a typical story where there's something occurs that's negative, there's a round of denials where everyone says, oh, no, you're wrong. The true story leaks out, and then only a year or even more later is there finally official confirmation that the Mexicans did open fire on the Border Patrol.
Congressman Duncan D. Hunter of California obtained some information from Homeland Security, and according to that information, there have been 300 documented incursions by Mexican military and law enforcement authorities onto our soil since 2004. Now, Chris, under strict definitions of international law, couldn't those incursions be considered acts of war?
They could be, because you have an armed force of a foreign army or police force, either, entering onto the sovereign soil of the United States. And they do so not always in hot pursuit. That's one of the explanations that's been provided. Sometimes they do so as a ruse to draw our Border Patrol away. Sometimes they do it providing security for drug loads. So there's any number of different reasons why Mexican armed forces and Mexican police force will cross into the United States. And sadly, or unfortunately, it's not normally in hot pursuit of bad guys. Normally, it's in some way trying to facilitate criminal activity.
So in other words, Mexican authorities are saying to the drug cartels, hey, we got your back. We will step up and provide security for you even across this international border.
Right. Frankly, they're taking a piece of the action. They're in business together.
Well, we hear this, and we have been lectured for the better part of 2 decades by presidents of the Republic of Mexico asking us, of course, to open our border. What is it? It sounds to me like the president of Mexico ought to get his own law enforcement apparatus and his own military in gear before he tries to lecture Americans about our own border policies.
Well, JD, based on your background, you know better than most people that Mexico is in a state of near collapse. It's a failed state. About every 6 months, one half of the police force arrests the other half. Their own attorney general a few years ago was murdered in the courtyard of their justice ministry. I mean, there's a very thin veneer kind of holding Mexico together. You know, they're not in a position to lecture the United States on border security.
And one thing's for sure, it's especially disturbing when politicians here in the United States seem to take their cues from the request to the Mexican government. Witness today the fact that Hillary Clinton is doubling down on amnesty, something that Jeb Bush says he will offer. And today, the leading Democrat says, hey, these folks need to have a pathway to citizenship. What do you think is going to happen as our government continues to turn a blind eye or, in essence, incentivize crossing our border illegally?
It's frankly, it's suicidal. We can't continue to import an 18th century labor force that's either illiterate or semi-literate into a 21st century economy in a way that drives down wages for the average working American and expect that there'll be no consequences when social services are tapped at a rate that is closing hospitals and bankrupting public health facilities. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect that there be no dire long-term financial consequences. It's a bad situation, only getting worse.
That standard definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, might also result in national suicide for our own nation. Chris Farrell of Judicial Watch, thanks for your time. We'll follow up on this with you. You heard what Chris had to say. Your comments welcome via email, also Facebook, and on Twitter. Stay tuned.